everything I want to talk about here today is, and everything that we do, and every single interaction that we have with our customer, that we do it with an experience mentality versus a task mentality. And I'm guessing by hearing those words, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Because you can go to any place of business out there, and I don't care if it's a restaurant or a store, and you can tell when the employees there, they're focused on completing the tasks, can't you? And they're just kind of going through the motions. They might be doing that very efficiently, but they're focused in on completing the tasks. And here's the thing, when we do what we do as a task, our customer tends to feel very processed. And it is very hard to feel a sense of loyalty when you feel processed. So versus now going into a place of business where the employees are still completing the tasks, right? Obviously, we've got things going on that we need to take care of. But they're focused on creating a positive experience. And now if I'm your customer, now I feel valued. And to me, I think wherever our customers fall on that continuum between feeling processed and feeling valued, that's ultimately going to be their loyalty factor. All right, and so there are 4 things I think we can do in any organization to really bridge that gap between feeling processed and feeling valued. All right, and keep in mind today as I'm talking about creating these great experiences for your customers, I want to make sure that you all know that I know that there is a difference between what you all do and what Disney World does. All right, believe me, I know you don't work in a theme park, right? I know there are differences. But the biggest pushback we'll get from people is this. People come up to us and say, well, here's a difference for you. It's fun to work out at Disney World, right? That's what people always think. It's fun to work out at Disney World. It absolutely is not. All right, now I didn't work out there for a very long time, but I can tell you right now, after the first day, you can forget about all that Mickey Mouse crap you always hear about. All right, all that pixie dust. Did any of you ever go to Disney World in the summertime? I'm showing you went to Disney World in the summertime. You remember how hot it was out there, right? It's miserable. But folks, I want you to think about those Disney characters that are out there walking around. Right? And I hate to burst bubbles here, but if you don't already know this, there are people inside of those costumes out there. All right, I'm sorry if I ruined that for you, but there are. And I actually did something like that out there before. I was one of the Easter bunnies out there in the Easter Day parade. It was one of my many proud moments, thanks to Mom and Dad working out there. All right, but I can still remember after all these years how miserable that costume was. And so I can only imagine how bad it is for those folks in the Mickey costumes and the Goofy costumes, especially in like July and August. All right, but regardless of all that, you still have to make it a great experience for those guests, right? Because they paid an awful lot of money to be there. And they don't care that you're hot or uncomfortable. And you know, I recognize you work in a challenging industry, all right? But I will tell you, you have not truly lived until you are the poor cast member. Out of Disney World, they call their employees cast members. You have not lived until you are that poor cast member that they stick out in front of Space Mountain or the Tower of Terror or Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. You're one of the big iconic rides out there, telling guests that the ride is closed for maintenance, for like a month. People would just melt down on you. And there was this one time it was my turn to be out front telling people the ride was closed, and had this one guest come up to me, had his 2 little kids with him, and I had to say, I'm sorry, the ride's closed. And he just froze. He just kind of stared at me, and I said again, yeah, I apologize, the ride's closed. He looked down at his 2 kids and said, thank the man for ruining our vacation. So peel the curtain back a little bit, all right? It's different from what you do, but I think service-driven organizations can all learn from each other. All right, so the 4 principles I want to talk about here today, they apply no matter what industry you're in, and they apply no matter who your customers are. All right, because I'm a big believer in everybody has a customer. All right, so just know that these will also apply to internal service as well. All right, so the first principle, if we're going to move from this task mentality to this experience mentality now, is to look at everything through the lens of your customer. All right, let's look at every single thing that you do through the lens of whoever it is you're serving. And here's why I think this is important. Now, most organizations do not. Now, they will say that they do. They'll say they look through the lens of their customer, but they don't, and I can prove it to you. Just by a show of hands here, how many of you over the last several years you have purchased furniture or an appliance that you had to have delivered to your house? So let me ask you this question. What were the guidelines that furniture or appliance store gave you for the delivery time? What were the guidelines?
9 to 5.
Yeah, 9 to 5 or a 5-hour window. You know, we recently ordered my wife a new desk for her home office, and they said to be there between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. and then showed up at 9 p.m. with a broken desk. So, it's not usually that terrible, but it's a window of time during the day, right? So here's my question for you. Whose convenience are they actually concerned with? Theirs. So to me, the better question is, whose lens are they looking through? Theirs. Yet I'll guarantee you, you go to their website, you look at their marketing materials, and they'll say, we are a customer-focused organization. You know, you experience the processes they put you through. And I'll tell you right now that it all comes down to those processes that we put our people through. All right, and so often they're not. And so to me, that's really the question we need to always be asking ourselves is, whose lens are we looking through when we make the different decisions that we make here? And contrast that example there with one of my favorite organizations. And keep in mind, now they're not perfect, right? There's no such thing as a perfect organization. But Southwest Airlines, right? Because they're not perfect, they've had their issues. And I know they get used in presentations like this a lot, and it's really just a testament to how good they've been over the years. Because they have now posted 47 consecutive years of profitability in that industry. And so clearly they're doing something right. And the thing I think they do so well is they understand the lens of their customer. And the way that I see it, because I do travel them quite a bit, is through the performance of their flight attendants. And I don't mean this about all of them, all right? But for the most part, I think Southwest has some of the best flight attendants out there. Because on top of everything else, they have taken those same boring safety spiels. Yeah, that most of us, we've all heard hundreds of times, right? I mean, if I asked you to, how many of you could probably come up here right now? You could give an airline safety spiel, right? So how many of us are actually listening? No, right? Yeah, there might be like that one person that pulls out the card and follows along, and we all kind of laugh at them. But you know, the rest of us, we tune it out because we've heard it so many times. But I'm sure everybody has either been on one of those Southwest flights with the flight attendant having some fun, or have seen one of the countless videos on YouTube that have gone viral over the years. Hers was probably the most famous. She went on to be on like The Amazing Race and a couple other things like that. But you know, there are several others like hers out there. But as you're looking at this picture right now, that flight attendant doing one of her main tasks and delivering that safety spiel. What do you notice all the passengers are doing?
Smiling.
Smiling, right? They're laughing, they're having a good time. And they're paying attention, which isn't usually what you're doing at that time, is it? You're usually worried about the flight, worried about what you got to do when you get wherever you're going, or maybe you just look more like this poor guy right here. But thinking about that, now here's my business question to you. How much did it cost Southwest Airlines to do that for their passengers? Nothing, right? Because remember, the flight attendants are already there. They have to give the safety spiel. In this case, that's just the law. Plus, on top of that, they know flying is a very nervous time for a lot of people. And little things like that, if you only for just a moment, helps to put people's minds at ease. And it brings them back to being about the experience. To me, that's really the beauty of looking through the lens of the customer. It's not about money. It's not looking at ways that you got to solve or spend money to solve a problem, but it's about taking a step back and looking at something that you've been doing here probably for a very long time and turning that lens around and seeing it through your customer's lens. And I will tell you, when you do start to understand the lens of your customers, everything changes. You start to understand and recognize why they sometimes say some of the strange things they say, or why you sometimes get those strange questions. Because I know everybody in here has gotten a question from a customer at one point or another where you were just wondering, what the heck is going on in your mind right now? Did you leave your brain out in the parking lot? Like, I've had friends over the years, they worked out at Subway restaurants, and they would say, you would not believe how often people come in and ask us, how much are the $5 footlongs? Like some of my favorites, like when I used to work out at Disney World. And as I mentioned, I worked on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. So we were gold miners from the 1800s. And that was our theme out there. So I'd be standing out in front of Big Thunder Mountain, my gold miner's outfit. I had a cowboy hat on, and people told me I looked like Woody from Toy Story. Every single day, guests would come up and ask me, do you work here? You know, I would just think to myself, I'm a grown man here. You know, this was just at my closet next to my Batman costume today. And then the all-time great, silly Disney question that you get out there in the parks a lot more often than you would expect is guests literally come up and ask you this question. What time is the 3 o'clock parade? How do you answer that question without making them feel stupid for asking it? You know? But when you understand the lens, you understand what they're really asking, the question behind the question. And so we were trained, for example, to know if a guest were to come up and ask us what time is the 3 o'clock parade. What they really want to know is what time is the parade going to get right here, where I am? Because that parade route's 1.5 miles long. So it wouldn't get to some parts along the route until 3:30. So it was a legitimate question, but only if you're seeing it through their lens. And how about this? When I'm standing out front of Big Thunder Mountain in my gold miner's outfit, and a guest comes up and asks me, "Do you work here?" What do they really want to know? What are they really asking? Can you help me, right? Yeah. So again, it's a legitimate question, right? Maybe they asked it in a funny way, but you've got to be seeing it through their lens to truly see that legitimacy. And what I think so often is the problem, and this becomes especially true after we've been doing what we do for a longer period of time, is we start to make assumptions that our customers just know every single thing that we know about the operation, about what goes on here. I think that's just human nature. And while sometimes they do, sometimes you've worked with folks for a long enough time, right? That they have a pretty good idea about the contracts and the terms and all that. But for the most part, they don't know every single thing that you do. And so more often than not, when there is a problem with one of our interactions with one of our customers, and we try to take a step back later and analyze what went wrong, and we'll say, well, there was a communications issue. And, I was think to myself, what does that really mean? And here's what I think it means now. I think it means we as the team member in the situation, that we made an assumption that our customer knew something that they did not actually know. And then we acted on that assumption. And our relationship suffered as a result. And now keep in mind, this isn't something we do strictly in our professional lives. And we do this in our personal lives as well. A number of years ago, I was probably 9 years old at the time, and I was flying with my family from Orlando to California for vacation. And so it was me, it was my parents, and then it was my younger brother, David. He was about 3 years old at the time. And you know how during takeoff and landing, a lot of time the kids on the plane, they'll start crying as their ears are popping, and they're in pain. So sure enough, as we're getting ready to land in California, my brother David's ears start popping, he starts crying, and so my mom started to dig around in her purse to see if she had any candy or gum, something for him to chew on. And she had this little packet of M&Ms. So she took out the M&Ms, opened it up, and handed one to David and said, "Here you go, David. This will help your ears." So David took that M&M from her, he looked at it for a second, he said, "Okay." Put it in his ear. I love that story. My little brother David, he's 30 years old now, and he hates these stories because he knows it makes him look like such an idiot. But my mom here now, she made an assumption, didn't she? And David, he really needed some information. See, ended up with this M&M stuck in his ear. But if you were to step back and think about it, if you were to hand something to a 3-year-old and say, "Here you go, this will help your ears," what's that 3-year-old going to do? They're going to stick it in their ear. Now, when we're out of our comfort zone, or we're confused about something, or concerned about something, and very often when we're out there in the world in our role of customer, deep down, we can become like that, right? Sometimes we can become 3 years old, especially today. People are so much more emotionally charged right now. And like out of Disney World, I don't care how many times you've been there before, it's still a sensory overload, right? There's a lot going on out there. And so when you start to think about it this way, you can start to understand then why you might sometimes get those strange questions. And so we've got to find a way to really turn this lens around. And I want to share with you a way to do this. I've got a couple tools that you're going to find in the handout there. And on page 4, you're going to see the first tool. And this is something that we call customer experience mapping. And the way that this works is you look at a process that you want to get better at in terms of your customer's experience. Right? And obviously now you know your process is a whole lot better than I do. Right? This would be anything from a new hire orientation, starting a new loan process, dealing with an upset customer right now, whatever that process might be. And then you gather a group of the right team members that are involved in that particular process, and then you map it out step by step. All right, so obviously each box up here represents a step in that process. But here's the key. Each step needs to be through the lens of your customer, right? Not the lens of your particular department, all right? And so I'll show you what I mean. Let's say a process that you want to get better at is when a customer is calling in and they've got a question or an issue about one of the terms on one of their agreements. That was kind of vague, but something that's going to require you a little bit of time to research and dig into it before getting back to them with an answer. All right. Now, in my mind, this is a moment of truth. How you handle this interaction with this customer. This is a moment of truth because you've got to now get back to them. And so what I would recommend you do is you give everybody in the room a copy of this form. And then up at the front, you just have a flip chart or a whiteboard. Just start brainstorming ideas. To get you started, you say, so what happens first? And somebody would say, well, the first thing that happens is the customer places the call to the office. So we get that up there. Next, somebody says now they'll navigate to their proper team member. So we'll put that up there. Next, somebody says now they'll provide their customer information, whatever you're going to need before you can get them the answer that they'll need. You might need to rearrange some of these or ask yourself, is there another step that should go in between one of these? But right now the goal is just brainstorming, just getting the ideas out. Next, somebody says now they'll explain the question or the issue. And then somebody says now we'll research the answer. All right, because this is one, remember, you were going to have to research. And I want to just take a look at what's happening here, because I think it's important in using this tool, but also just being in this mindset. Now, the first 4 boxes we listed up there, now those were all through the lens of your customer. All right, but that 5th box, research the answer, that one's through your lens. All right, when you get to one of these points, and it's going to happen, where somebody says, now at this step, we do this, you've got to stop it right there, and you've got to ask the question, now, while we're doing that, what's our customer doing? Now, it's a very small switch there, but in this particular case, what's the answer to that question? They're waiting, right? Our customer waits while we research the answer. That's what needs to go in that box there, all right? And now you've got something to work with because now you're starting to see it through their lens. And I recognize that seems like a very small, nitpicky kind of a change. I think it's all the difference in the world. And I believe it all comes down to what we're putting our customers through. All right, and then obviously you would continue it on from there. Now, a lot of your processes, they might have more than 9 steps. Just make this one up as an example. But the first step is let's identify a process that we want to get better at, all right, in terms of our customer's experience. Next, let's gather a group of the right team members, and then let's map it out step by step. And then the third step, and this is where the magic of this tool really comes into play. And you'll find the next piece to this tool on page 5 of your handout there, where for each step that you just listed out here now, you ask yourself 2 very important questions. What would mediocre service look like or sound like at each step? And then what would excellent service look like or sound like at each step? And here's the reason I recommend you do it exactly this way. As you're going around the room and you're brainstorming and you're asking people, what would mediocre service look like? And I promise you, as good as I know you all are here, somewhere along the way, one of those steps, someone in that room is going to say, you know what we just described as mediocre at that step kind of sounds a lot like what we're currently doing. Now, which sounds kind of negative, I get that, but it's really not. And here's the important distinction to remember. I'm not talking about poor service. And when we give somebody poor service, we know it, don't we? We know we've really screwed something up with one of our customers. Mediocre, that's more a sin of omission. Don't even really recognize that we're doing it. Now, it wasn't bad, but we just sort of processed somebody through one of the steps there. So now for you, if you're running this meeting or taking part in this meeting, it gives you this wonderful opportunity to say, well, if that's what we're doing at that step right now, and we're saying that it's mediocre, then what would excellent service look like at that step? And that's when the ideas really start to come out. And recognize I'm not naive, all right? I recognize you will not be able to implement every single idea that comes out. But for some of these things, you're going to be saying to yourself, why didn't we ever think of this before? Now, for example, we do a lot of work with the banking industry. And it's just one of the industries we spend a lot of time with. Now, there has got to be a bank out there. They were the very first ones to say, if a customer comes through our drive-through teller and they've got a dog in the car with them, we ought to send a dog biscuit in the container when we send it back out to the car. Right? Any of you ever banked at a bank that did the dog biscuit thing? I always thought that was a great idea. And so when we work with a bank that, someone would come up to us afterwards and say, oh, that's a great idea. We should do that too. But I always say, now be sure to coach your employees to really make sure that there is in fact a dog in the car. You don't want somebody sitting there thinking, this is my son right here. He's not that handsome, but, send out the lollipop. Yeah, but those are the kinds of ideas that they cost virtually nothing, right? But doesn't that just change the whole dynamic of the experience? And so I want to show you how powerful this tool can really be if you use it. Back in the early 1990s, Disney World wanted to raise the bar of service. They wanted to get better at what they were doing. And this is when they were already on top of the world. Right, which is always a great time to ask, okay, what can we do now to just get a little bit better? Like when I think about you, I see that Amora was named 2021 Business of the Year here, right? I mean, that's a great accomplishment, right? So, okay, so now what can we do to make sure we can stay up there every single year, right? And so Disney, they looked at hundreds of areas of opportunities, right? And one that they saw as an area of opportunity was this: getting the guests from the park back to the hotel at the end of the evening. Because contrary to popular belief, the end of the day out at Disney World, now that is not a happy time. All right, and if you've been out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, you're there all day long, you're hot, you're tired, Kids are hanging off of you, you got no money left. And then at 10 o'clock, those fireworks go off. And when those fireworks are over, the magic is done. Because it's just this mass, exodus of humanity. And to watch these poor folks as they're just dragging out of the park. And it doesn't really matter what time of the day is the end of the day for you and your family out of Disney World. All right, when it's time to go home from Disney, all those cute little kids you saw going in earlier that day, all happy and excited, they'll look like this when it's time to go home from Disney World. So those are my two precious ones out there, the happiest place on earth, all right? So that's just one example. They did this with a lot of processes. And like anything you would map out with your teams, there's an awful lot of things that are happening behind the scenes at each one of these to make this happen. All right, but through your lens, the lens of the guest, this is how you get back. So they gathered a group of cast members together and they talked about this and they brainstormed. What would mediocre service look like? What would excellent service look like? And they came up with some wonderful ideas, like now the bus driver. Some of them will hold Disney trivia contests on the bus rides back, or some of them get the kids singing along to the different Disney songs, or singing happy birthday to a kid celebrating a birthday. But here's the important thing to remember. Those bus drivers, and they were already driving the buses, right? So there's no added time, there was no added cost. But it was taking a step back and looking at something that they've been doing there since 1971 and turning that lens around. All right, but the one I want to really focus in on there is that last step, entering the hotel room. Because to me, it just highlights the power of one idea when it can be leveraged across an organization. In my opinion, now one of the hardest jobs out at Disney World is being a housekeeper in one of the hotels. All right, cleaning up after people on vacation, that is a very tough job. And if you've ever been out there with small kids, you remember how they would collect the stuffed Disney characters, right? The stuffed Mickeys and the Plutos. And here's what normally happens. So most people that go on vacation at Disney World, they spend 4 nights and 5 days. And that's the average length of a vacation at Disney World. And so what usually happens is the first day, the families are out there in the park, kids are buying up those different stuffed animals, and then that night they're putting them back in the hotel room. Next day, families back in the park, kids buy more of those stuffed animals, and then that night they're going back in the hotel room. And over the course of vacation, they accumulate as the kids keep buying. And so what the housekeepers would normally do is they'd come in, they'd push those characters off to the side, they'd clean up the rooms, and then off they would go, because they had a lot of rooms to clean. Well, on one evening, one housekeeper, and her name was Helen, decided that she was going to create a little bit of magic. And so she was doing evening turn down service, and she was in one of the guest rooms while they were off having dinner. And she did all the things she was supposed to do. She cleaned up the room, she turned down the beds, but then she took those stuffed Disney characters, she put them up on the kid's bed, up on the pillow, and then she tucked them in. And then she left a little note. Said, I know you had a busy day. The characters told me they were tired, so I tucked them in for you. And then she signed her name, Helen, left it on the bed. Doing something like that probably took her, 20, maybe 30 seconds at the most to do that? But folks, I want you to really think about that family that's walking back to that hotel room door, all right? Because remember the family we're talking about, all right? And if you've ever been out there, you know as that family's walking towards that hotel room door, you know that those kids are fighting with each other, right? And if you've ever been out there, you know that the parents are fighting with each other, right? That's the magical Disney moment that's happening right here. All right, but then they open up the door, and this is what they see, and it's Disney again. All because one housekeeper who has a hard job already, and I can tell you right now, does not get paid a whole lot of money, said, I'm going to create some magic. It always starts with that idea. And they don't just have to come from management, all right? They come from anywhere. But more importantly then, from a business perspective now, is how can we leverage these wonderful ideas through a tool like experience mapping? Now, you remember how I told you they gather cast members together to talk about these things, right? Well, at one of those meetings, Helen, that housekeeper, was there. So as they're going around the room and they're brainstorming and they're asking people, what are some things you can do? What are some things you've heard about? What are some things you've seen? And they came to Helen. She said, well, I don't know if this means anything to anybody, but I've been tucking in the Disney characters. Now, sure, it was embarrassing for her to say that in front of her coworkers there, but everybody just thought this was the greatest idea. And it took off. The housekeepers were talking about it, managers were talking about it. It became kind of legendary out there, and it even became something of a competition for the housekeepers to see the different things they can do. Like some of them, they'll line the characters up in front of the TV, and then they'll turn it on. Others will put them in a circle playing cards, and you walk in and freak out thinking they came to life. But again, it was going back to one housekeeper with a hard job already saying, I'm going to create some magic. But finding ways to really develop those ideas through a tool like experience mapping is going to be crucial. And so when I come to the end of one of these segments here, I'm going to have you all, and you at home as well, turn to the last 2 pages of your handout there. You're going to see an area, it's called the individual action plan. And what I want to do is I want to have us spend just a couple of minutes. I want you to write down a key process through which you serve your customers. All right, I know we've got a lot of different roles that are in here, and so I know they're going to be different. And then I want you to write down 2 immediate actions that you can take to really demonstrate your understanding of their lens in that process. All right, so let's take 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll come back and jump into the second principle. All right, did everybody get enough time to think of something? I'm not going to have you report out or anything like that, so don't worry there. But if you need another minute, let me know, and then we'll jump back into the second principle. And if you haven't finished, I'm sure you could work on that tonight instead of going out and doing something fun. So the second principle now, if we are going to really deliver this truly loyalty driving experience to our customers, is this idea right here, is to pay attention to the details. Because, and this is the phrase that I hope you always remember, everything speaks. Right? Everything speaks. Every detail, big or small, is communicating something to your customer about the brand, whether you want it to or not. And so the question you need to ask yourself about every single detail is it enhancing or detracting from the brand? Now, for example, this is a picture I took outside of a hospital that obviously puts efforts into their landscaping, right? It's colorful, it's vibrant, right? But I know right now everybody is looking at that Pepsi can. Now, at Disney World, we had a term for everything, okay? And we would call that a visual intrusion, which it is, okay? Because when I think about a hospital, I think about clean. I think about attention to detail. And it doesn't take too many things like that to start adding up before, at least subconsciously, I start to question the quality of everything else. All right, and let's be honest, and I'm not saying this would be any of you, all right, but let's be honest here. Most employees in most organizations, they're walking by, they see that Pepsi can on the ground. Be honest here, what are they going to do?
Walk past it.
They're going to walk right on by, right? Some might kick it while they do, but most will walk right on by. Now, everything speaks says no. Now, that is an intrusion on everything that we're trying to create. So you go over and you pick it up and you throw it away. And so I would ask you then, in your world, what are the Pepsi cans? And what are those things that taken one at a time, maybe don't make such a big deal, but you start stacking some of these things on top of each other and you begin to take away from the experience that you're trying to create. This next one, my father actually sent this one to me a number of years ago. He was out on the road traveling and he was getting ready to board one of these small little commuter airplanes. He was out in Abilene, Texas. And it's one of these really small planes. And as he was waiting to board, he happened to notice something on the wing of this plane. And he got a picture of it. He got a close-up.
Oh.
Now, I don't know if you can see it on the camera there, but there was duct tape on the wing. All right, now everything speaks. Okay, what would that say to you as the passenger?
Next slide, please.
Yeah, get me the heck away from this plane, I'm sure. And I will admit, it does say a lot about my father's intelligence that he did, in fact, get on the plane that day. All right, and like most of you, I'm a pretty big believer in duct tape. Okay, but that would be pushing me just a little too far outside of my duct tape comfort zone. All right, and this was one of those planes where it was so small where the pilot was the flight attendant. You know, they open up the door and they give the spiel. So as he's boarding the plane, he says to the pilot, now you know you got some duct tape on the wing there, right? And there was some technical term for it. He says, oh no, that's high-speed aviation tape. Everything speaks. Okay, you tell me what that is. That's duct tape, right? I don't care what the technical term is. And it's not building my confidence. It's not building my trust. And in our world today, that trust is crucial. And so again, I would ask you in your worlds, what is the duct tape? And what are those things that can whittle away at the trust and take away from the brand? And I'll tell you right now, it can be something as simple as getting different answers from different people across the organization about the same issue. It's a different application of it, sure, but it's duct tape as far as your customers are concerned. This next one, I was checking into a hotel one time. I was walking down the hallway down to my room, and I came across a sign, which I thought was funny. You might not, but I thought this one was funny.
That's convenient.
And then I have no idea whose convenience they're talking about here, but I do know that it was not mine. And in that same hotel, up on the mirror in the bathroom, there was this little handwritten note. It said towels are inventoried every day. You will be charged for any missing towels. Now, everything speaks. What's that sign really saying to me?
They don't trust you.
They don't trust you. You're probably a thief, right? And these were some very nice towels. All right, I still have them. But I don't think that's the message that they intended, right? But as you and I know, what we intend, that makes no difference, right? It's what the customer perceives. So even the signage we use, the wording we use, it all matters, right? It all plays a part. And this next one, we were doing some work with a retail organization. They had some nice merchandise and some nice stores, and we were visiting one of their locations and came across this scene here. And it's an old picture, it doesn't do it justice, but this was a nice store, nice merchandise. But what do you all notice as the problem?
The trash.
Yeah, somebody left the stockroom door open. Now here's the thing. Backstage just came on stage. All right, now obviously every organization has a backstage that it needs to operate. But the problem becomes when that backstage impacts the onstage customer experience. Yeah, so here you go through all this stuff. You have this nice store, you've got this nice merchandise. Somebody props that stockroom door open and the brand suffers. So as I mentioned, we were doing some work with them, so we brought this up to the manager, and he said, well, you know, when our employees go back to get stock, they prop the door open, they get what they need, they come back out, and they close the door. It's only open for a couple seconds. But think about it, that probably happens, what, 40, 50 times a day? Just in that one location. I hope you'd all agree with me. That's an awful lot of backstage coming on stage. And then there's also what we call attitudinal, everything speaks. And I'm sure you've all been in one of those situations where you're out at a company somewhere and there are a couple of employees who they're a bit more concerned in talking amongst themselves than they are in serving you. They're busy finishing up a phone call or a text message before they acknowledge your existence. I don't know how that feels, right? Or you happen to overhear them saying something negative about another customer or about an employee or about the organization. And the way I'll see this play out most often is when we blame another person or a department for something that went wrong. You know, when we throw one part of our company under the bus, we're throwing the whole company under the bus. And I've got a short video that I want to share with you here that I think perfectly just captures this whole attitudinal philosophy of things that need to stay behind the scenes, out of sight of the customer. And it comes from a newscast, and I will tell you that the quality of the video is not the best, but the message is just so good that I wanted to share it with you. And it's about 2 minutes long, and for the first half or so, you're going to think my point is one thing about customer service, but at about the halfway point, it's going to become painfully clear that my point is something else entirely. And so again, this comes from a newscast.
So, well, it's been being worked on for many weeks already, and there's nobody on overtime, there's nobody working on the weekends. There's a lot that could be done to have this done a lot sooner. I'm here every day.
Well, she lives on the first floor, and you, so, I mean, I don't see,
I care about my other neighbors.
well, I mean, so, I mean, the people, it's scheduled, it's a contracted job. We don't tell the elevator company when to work their people. They submit a schedule to us. They said they could do the elevator in 6 weeks. So all we're trying to hold them to is meeting their deadline. As far as doing elevator repairs 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, I don't see that as being a typical process, nor do I, is it a typical process.
All right, I gotta go now. I want to thank you both. Thank you. All right, it's back to you, Jim.
Holly, don't let her go away. That's, what, does she have a response to that? Is she still there?
What's that?
Did the lady just leave?
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. Should get to that
She's
discussion.
back if you want her.
Yes, yes.
What would you like to know?
I'd like to know a response to what the gentleman said. The gentleman's a very effective spokesperson for the company, but obviously the people who live there are not satisfied with his explanation.
Right. So what do you want now?
Well, if I have to teach you how to be a reporter, Ollie, I'll do that later.
Now, why don't you do that later, Jim? I think the lady expressed herself, and you're not here, you're there. Is there any question you'd like me to ask her?
And no, I'll give you lessons on how to become a reporter.
Well, I'll give you some lessons on how to be an editor, because I was your boss once.
Yeah, you were, and are no longer. How'd that happen?
Well, I don't
You just
know.
haven't built a law.
Good morning, Jim. We are live at the fire zone.
Isn't that awesome? I'm sure there was a bit of a ratings bump the next day as people tuned in to see what these guys were gonna do next, but you know, it's not usually that public, right? But you and I mean, we know things like that, they happen all the time, right? Where you can tell the inner workings of a company just by seeing how the employees interact with each other. And I want to let you all in today on a few behind the scenes Disney secrets. All right, these are all things that I witnessed over my lifetime out there, and you have to promise me you're never going to tell anybody. All right, and some of these are going to shock you, so I'm warning you right now. Just get ready. Now, I have heard Disney cast members swear. Yes, I have. I've heard Disney cast members complain about the guests. I did it myself all the time. I have seen Cinderella smoking a cigarette, which is all kinds of weird, all right? Because there she is in all her glory. She's got the wig, she's got the dress, she's just puffing away. Big cloud of smoke following her around everywhere. But where would you see something like that out of Disney World? Backstage, right? Behind the scenes. Because just imagine you saved up for years. You took out a second mortgage on your house so you could bring the whole family out to Disney World. All right, you're out front, you're paying your money to get in, everybody's excited. And you finally make it inside Magic Kingdom, and you're walking down Main Street, USA. And there in front of the castle is Cinderella. All right, and your child, your precious baby little child goes running up to Cinderella, tugs on her dress. Cinderella turns around, she's got a cigarette in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other, and says, "Kid, I'm on break." Yeah, well, what would be the impact on your child? Probably need therapy. Okay. So here's my business question for you. Does it matter that in that moment, how many billions of dollars they spend building Disney World? It's not worth anything. All right, so I'm going to ask you a strange question here, and I recognize this is a strange question, and I'm not even looking for an answer. I just want you to be thinking about it, all right? But in your worlds, which again, you know a whole lot better than I do, what are those potential smoking Cinderella behaviors? What are those things that can so often creep into our performance, oftentimes without us even recognizing it, but just take away from the whole experience? Right? And I'm not talking about Cinderella anymore, and I'm not talking about smoking. You know what I'm talking about. Right? So those things, they're the realities of the world that we live in, but so often creep into our performance and can just take away from the brand. And as we know, a brand, that's a very fragile thing. And so one of the things I recommend organizations do is come together and have a dialogue. And you'll see this on the next page of your handout. I think it's page 6 in your handout. You come together, have a dialogue on what are our everything speaks distractors, both physical and attitudinal. And then one for one, if those are distractors, then what do our everything speaks commitments need to be? What is it that we need to commit to as an organization to make sure those distractors don't creep into the performance? And I actually believe in taking it a step further and calling them everything speaks non-negotiables. I believe world-class organizations, they have non-negotiables. And my recommendation to you is to come up with your top 10. those top 10 everything speaks non-negotiables. You might end up with more than that, all right, but I want you to focus in on those top 10. Those things that after a while, they just become part of the culture, just part of the way we do things. And to give you an example of an everything speaks distractor now, Disney World. There's this big, beautiful place, right? The Magic Kingdom, they've got this beautiful castle, they've got all these different themed lands. It's beautiful. Now you tell me, wouldn't an everything speaks distractor be if there was trash everywhere? But folks, I want you to really think about the reality of that business. It generates a tremendous amount of trash. And so, because that is a reality, one of the Everything Speaks commitments is, as a cast member, you're walking through the park, you see a piece of trash on the ground, it is your job to go over, pick it up, throw it away. All right, that's non-negotiable. And it doesn't matter if you're a frontline employee or you're the vice president of marketing. You go over, you pick it up, and you throw it away. And interestingly enough, when I asked earlier today what impressed you about Disney World, what was the first thing somebody said? How clean it is. Because it's everybody's job. And the beauty of it, the reason I say really focusing on those top 10 is after a while, if you're really staying on top of your folks, you're holding them accountable. The behaviors associated with those things, they just become part of who you are. You know, you don't even need to think about it anymore. I mean, we could be walking through the Magic Kingdom having a conversation. I can notice a piece of trash on the ground, go over, pick it up, throw it away, and not even miss a beat in the conversation because it just became a part of me. And I was doing it for so long. And that's the idea, is you want these behaviors to just become part of your team members' natural behavior. Because if everything does speak, then let's make sure those details are saying exactly what we want them to say. All right, I'm going to have you go back to that individual action plans on the second to last page of your handout there. And I want to have us spend a couple minutes here looking at the pay attention to the details section. And here what I want you to do is commit to 2 immediate actions that you and your company can take to begin implementing this whole everything speaks mindset into your own performance. So do 2 for physical everything speaks, and then 2 for attitudinal everything speaks. And then we'll jump back into the third principle. Now you guys are already doing so well. So I'm going to jump into the third principle here now. And the third one, if we're going to really move from this task mentality to this whole experience mentality, is to create moments of wow for your customers. And I chose this phrasing, moments of wow, very carefully. Because I think so often people who do what we do, teach customer service, that so often we do you a disservice. And it's because of the examples that we love to use. And we love the huge, grandiose wow examples, which are great when we can do them. Now, if an opportunity ever presents itself that you can do a big wow for one of your customers, obviously I think that we should. All right, because those are really the things that legends are made of. But I actually believe that the magic is in the little wows, creating the moments of wow. Because here's the thing, the little wows, now they add up. Right? Over time, the little wows add up. It doesn't have to be big things. Simply remembering one of your customers' names or a detail about them is an example of a little wow. I know that's not a big thing, but in the back of their mind, if only for a moment, they're thinking, wow. And that's the idea. And just think about the number of potential points of contact that you all have with your customers over the lifetime of doing business with them. All right, it doesn't have to be big things. One of the things they used to ask us to do at Disney World that it seemed so small, but it had a tremendous impact was, if you're walking through the park and you saw a guest getting ready to take a photograph, is you go over and say, may I take that picture for you? So that you can be in the picture too. And that little thing in their eyes would just light up. Because just out of curiosity, are any of you like the designated photographer for your family? Yeah, don't you have trouble proving you're on some of the vacations too? Yeah, you don't show up in any of the pictures. For us growing up, it was always my mom. My mom would be our designated photographer. So every picture of us growing up, you'd always have like my little brother David, he'd be standing here. You'd have me standing in the middle. And then you'd have my dad over here, hold my mom's purse, every single picture. And so can I take that picture for you? Again, it's not a big thing, but there's that little moment of wow. So from there, then the question becomes, how can we build the little wows into the culture? And there's another tool I want to share with you. It's going to be on page 7 of your handout there. And this comes out of a tremendous amount of research done by the Gallup organization on what customers expect from any organization they're doing business with. And what Gallup found in their research, and this applies across industries, is that customers literally have a hierarchy of expectations. All right, think about it. Put yourself in the role of customer here too. All right, we literally have a hierarchy of expectations. All right, fundamentally, foundationally, customers expect accuracy. Yeah, I expect that you're going to get it right. Once that's in place, which it must be for anything else up there to count, then the next level up is availability. Now, when I need you, how accessible are you? How easy is it to do business with you? Once that's in place, which again, it must be, then the next level up is partnership. And do I feel that by the way that this is happening, by the way this transaction is playing out, that you actually care about my experience? Or do I feel that I'm being processed through the organization? And then finally, they have proven this. The highest level of service you can provide is advice. When you teach me something I did not know before, or I'm better because of the interaction that we just had, that's as good as it gets. And when you think about some of the best relationships that you have with your customers, my guess is it's because you've reached the pinnacle of that pyramid there. You have become the trusted advisor. All right, and it's important to recognize that it is a hierarchy. All right, each level will earn you the right to the next level. As a matter of fact, you can just draw a line through the middle of that pyramid there. You just cut the pyramid in half. Gallup would call those two things at the bottom there dissatisfiers. So if I'm the customer and you're you, and you are not accurate and you are not available, then I'm actively dissatisfied with the organization. So you lose points for not doing well at those things. But here's the frustrating part. Now, you don't get points for doing well at those things. And why is that? Those are expected, right? That's just the ticket of entry. So I'm not going to give you points for doing well at those things, but you will lose points for not doing well at them. All right, then what about those above the line, partnership and advice? Now, those are your wow opportunities. Those are the areas you have to separate yourself from all the competition that you have out there. All right, and when you think about the complaints that you would typically receive as an organization, my guess is that the majority of them come from those things below the line, accuracy and availability. And the compliments that you typically receive, I'm guessing that the majority of those come from those things above the line, partnership and advice. And the one caveat I will add to it is that it's probably not going to be appropriate in every single interaction that you teach me something new. All right, when you can, you should, because as we said, that's as good as it gets. But it's probably not going to be appropriate in every single interaction. But I hope you would all agree with me that we should always strive to get above that line there. Right? Our customers should always feel that sense of partnership. All right, and then the way to really turn it into a tool then is down at the bottom of that page, where for each role within the organization, you sit down and you define the terms that would define each of these things at excellence. All right, so for sales, what is accuracy at excellence? What is availability at excellence? And you define the terms that would define each of those things at excellence. And keep in mind that for different roles within the organization, that the terminology might be different. But just imagine if regardless of who I was interacting with across the organization, they were operating under accuracy, availability, partnership, and when appropriate, advice. The level of consistency that would bring to the whole experience. That's how we really create those moments of wow. And just to validate this, the next time you're out there in the world and you're getting great service anywhere, and I mean anywhere, take a step back and observe the behaviors. And I promise you'll be able to plug them in if it's great service. And I had an example of this a number of years ago. I was up in Chicago for a friend's wedding, and I had flown in the night before. And as I was in my hotel room packing, I realized that I had forgotten to pack a pair of dress shoes. I only had the tennis shoes that I'd worn on the plane. And so I went running down to the front desk, asked, where can I get a pair of dress shoes right away? And they sent me to a store called The Walking Company, which you might know it's a chain shoe store, and it's a great shoe store. And I can tell you that from an accuracy perspective, that the transaction itself, it was very accurate. But availability, I got down there and the store was packed, just absolutely packed with customers, and I almost left because I hate to shop. That's awful, but I had to get the shoes. So I went inside, and sure enough, all the salespeople, they were busy helping other customers, but there was this one salesperson who she looked up and she made eye contact with me. And it was good eye contact. It was the kind of eye contact that said, I see you. I know you're there. Please don't leave. I would have felt guilty leaving. So I decided to browse around, and sure enough, she was right next to me a couple minutes later and said, let's get you a pair of shoes. And I said, well, great, I'd like to try these on in a size 14. And she said, well, let me measure your foot first. I said, that's okay. I know I wear a size 14. And she said, please, I want to make sure we get you the right pair of shoes. Please let me measure your foot. So we were moving into the partnership phase here. Now, I mean, she cared. So I said, all right. So I sat down and put my foot in that little foot measuring gizmo thing. And she said, oh, see, you have a very Rubenesque foot. Now, at that time, I had no idea what that meant. But it sounded good, right? I mean, Rubenesque. I have learned it means I have a fat foot. But at the time, it sounded good. All right. And she said that the style of shoes that you selected would not be the most comfortable for you. This other pair would be much more comfortable. And being the skeptic that I am, I went over to see how much more this other pair was going to cost me, because I was sure she was just trying to upsell. But it turned out they were the same price. So I said, all right, let me try them on. So she went back, got the shoes, came back out, and put them on. And keep in mind, I have no idea how much of this was psychological. Okay, but these feel like the most comfortable pair of shoes I've ever worn in my entire life. It felt like I was walking on air. All right, and so I said, I'll take them. And it continued on from there to advice. Because as she was ringing me up, she said, now, if you ever buy another pair of shoes somewhere else, which I don't know why you would, but be sure to tell the salesperson that the arches in your feet have fallen, and you need to get shoes with extra arch support like these. But by that point, I was ready to marry this girl, all right, which caused me to ask the magic question. And I think some form of this question is the magic question in any business. I said, are there any Walking Company stores in Orlando, Florida, where I live? Because this has just been fantastic. And she looked it up and says, as a matter of fact, there is. There's one at the Millennium Mall. And since then, I purchased several more pairs of shoes there. I sent countless friends there. I talk about the experience all the time. So again, imagine, regardless who I'm interacting with across the organization, they're operating on accuracy, availability, partnership, and when appropriate, advice. The level of consistency that would bring to the whole experience. Now that's how we really create those moments of wow. And so I'm going to have us go back to our individual action sheet on the very last page there. You're going to see the section for create moments of wow. So what I want to do here is commit to one immediate action that your company will take to raise the bar of performance in each one of these customer expectations. All right, so we'll spend another 3 minutes, and then we'll come back and jump into the very last principle before we get ready to close out for the day. mentality to this whole experience mentality for our customers is to learn to really understand what frustrates them. And more importantly than that, then do something about those frustrations. The key is to do something about it. Because I believe there are plenty of organizations out there that they know exactly what frustrates their customers, but they don't do anything about it. And I know right now you're dealing with a lot of customers too, that they're scared. They don't really know what this COVID situation is going to end up doing to their business, and they're trying to push you to help them. And I know it can be hard to stay true to your true core values while you're also trying to tell people that sometimes you can't do what they want you to do. All right, so I understand it's a very challenging situation, but the last thing that I want to recommend that you do, once a quarter, at least, preferably once a month, but at least once a quarter, is come together and have a meeting, your service improvement meeting. And on page 8 of your handout, that you're going to see an agenda. All right, and the only topic for discussion at this meeting then is what are the barriers to service excellence? What are those frustrations that we know are out there? And then what are potential solutions to those problems? I know you are not going to solve every frustration that's out there, but by bringing people together, you will solve some, or at least alleviate some of the others. And just imagine if you could find a way to solve 4 frustrations a year, that is world class. I mean, there are very few organizations that can do that. So now after you go through this process, if I'm an employee working in the organization, now I know I'm set up, I can be a hero when inevitably a customer frustration pops out. Right? And when you start to look at it from an organizational perspective, you start to see all the different opportunities that are out there. But like at a Disney World, the #1 guest frustration has always been waiting in line. All right, so initially they did some pretty basic things, like you've all seen like the wait time clocks that they put out there, right? And they will tell you that they cheat those by about 5 minutes. All right, so if it says you're gonna be waiting for 30 minutes, it's likely gonna be closer to 25. Now, and Disney World knows that through your lens, they want to give you that little moment of wow. Yeah, because usually you'll see they'll be like the dad, they'll like start the stopwatch as they get in line, and then they get up to the front, you see them, hey, look at that. You know, it took 25 minutes. Yeah, we beat Disney World. You know, it's always those little things that give you the most joy in this. And that was kind of the first wave. And this is where I think it really started to take off. We talked earlier today about this ride, the Tower of Terror. And for those of you who have been on before, you remember how when you walked up to the ride, you walked through this like moss-covered, spooky-looking walkway, and then you get inside the hotel, and there's just dust and cobwebs everywhere. It looks like it's just been abandoned for decades. Then you move into this little small room, and Rod Serling from the Twilight Zone pops up and starts talking about how lightning struck the hotel, and everybody just vanished. And then from there, you move into the boiler room, where you wait to board the service elevator, which is the ride. And then along the way, there's a hissing steam. It seems like you're actually in a boiler room in there. And then there's also things like you've probably all heard of the hidden Mickeys, right? The Mickeys that are hidden all over the parks. There are people that have dedicated their whole lives to trying to find these hidden Mickeys. And for those of you that are struggling to find it, don't hurt yourself. It's right there. But all this that's going on, okay? But in actuality, what are you doing? You're waiting in line, right? So they made the line part of the experience. And I think for some of these rides, especially some of the newer ones like Avatar and Star Wars, and especially if you haven't seen the movies, you miss a big part of the experience if you don't wait in line at least a little bit. Now, if you've been to Disney over the last 25, 30 years or so, you've done the fast passes, right? And now they've got the app where you can manage your fast passes and all of your reservations for the park, right? It's a beautiful app. I think it costs like $400, but it's absolutely worth it. It's a free app, okay? But it was just one of those things going back to what are those frustrations that we know are there, and then what are potential solutions to those problems. And now my favorite example of using that agenda is going to sound like a strange one, but it's my favorite. And it's the parking lot operation out there at Disney World. Which most people don't think of as very important. But think about it, it's the very first and the last experience you have out there, right? It's vitally important. And if you've ever parked a car at Disney World, do you remember how carefully that parking lot was laid out, right? I mean, you don't get a choice in where you park your car. You got a cast member that waves you down an aisle. You've got another cast member that waves you into a spot. And then you've got a third cast member that waves you over to the trail that takes you into the park. And it happens just like that because Disney World knows through your lens, you want to get up the park quickly, right? Now you want to start going on the rides. And trust me on this, the Disney people, they want you in the park quickly too. All right, because the sooner you're in the park, the sooner you start to do what? Spend money. But not everything goes according to plan. right? I mean, just like what happens in your world. Right? So often as people have closed the door to their car, what do you think they realize they just did? Lock the keys in the car. And if you've ever done it anywhere, it's embarrassing, right? And it happens in slow motion too. It's like the door's closing, it's not closed yet, but all of a sudden there's that moment of horror as the sun listens off the keys and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna lock my, boom, keys are locked in the car. And I know it's a little harder to do nowadays, but in my last year at Disney World, and this was 2005, 19,000 people locked their keys in their car. All right, and some of them left the car running. All right, so as you can imagine, this is not a happy moment. All right, because again, it's the first thing that happened to you. All right, plus then the kids are like sitting there, come on, Dad, I can't believe you did this again. You know, you got other families walking by laughing at you. So what do? Well, go to that agenda. Disney World came together and they talked about this, and they came up with a solution. And it's actually a department called Key Control, where if you lock your keys in your car, you go up to one of the cast members working out there, tell them you locked your keys in the car, and they'll pull out their little radio, walkie-talkie, and call the Key Control department. And in about 2 or 3 minutes, this little blue and white van will show up at your car. And you know, don't come up and ask me where Disney hires these folks from, okay? Because I don't know. But in about 5 seconds, they're in your car. All right. I would love to see the recruiting strategy for this job. All right, but they're in your car with a big smile on their faces. They're giving the keys back to you. Now, in most places in the world, as they're handing those keys back to you, what would you be reaching for? Your wallet, right? And no charge, no tip. You know, the guests are just saying, oh, please let me give you something. And they just say, oh, no, just have a Disney day. You know, something silly like that. And what does it cost nowadays to get the keys out of a car? Like what, $70, $80, right? No charge. Now, we all know that by the end of the day, Disney World's going to get that $70, right? Trust me, before the day's over, you are parting company with that cash, right? But in that moment, and going back to what we talked about on the third principle, what are you saying to yourself? Wow, right? The little wows, they really do add up. Then what about the end of the day? What's the problem then? Can't remember where you parked, right? And that's what they told you like 4 times on the tram ride in where you parked your car. You know, it usually goes something just like this. To those of you now boarding, you are parked in Goofy 23. Now that's Goofy 23. Now, if I were you, I would write down Goofy 23. Because when you come out of the park at the end of the day, you're going to find your car parked in Goofy 23. Yet you'll sit outside the park watching people as they're coming out, laughing, talking with their families about how great all the rides were. And then they just freeze. And they get this deer in the headlights look. And you can read their minds because they're all thinking the same exact thing. We're going to have to wait until every single car is gone. And ours is the only one left. And as a cast member now, the easy thing to do would be just to stand off at the side and laugh at them. You know, but that wouldn't be the Disney way, now would it? So what do? We'll go back to that agenda. Disney World came together and they talked about this. And they came up with what I think is one of the all-time great solutions to a problem. And what they'll do now is they'll keep track of each row that they park and what time they park it. And then in the afternoon, the cast members that are working out there in the parking lot, they get a little card with those times on it. So when you come out at the end of the day and you can't remember where you parked, you go up to one of those cast members, tell them you can't remember where you parked your car. And they'll ask you, what time did you come in? And say, it was about 9 o'clock. I say, well, let's go to that card. 9 o'clock, it looks like you'd be parked in Goofy 23. Now they'll put you in one of their cars, they'll take you to that row. There is your car. What are you saying to yourself? Wow. Right? Now obviously this made the guest experience better, but it also makes that cast member experience better. Because now if I'm out there working in that parking lot and a guest comes up and tells me that they can't remember where they parked their car or they locked their keys in the car, now I'm set up, I can be a hero. You know, when we put the tools in our employees' hands to be heroes in those moments of truth like that, they will be motivated for you. And then they can take it to the next step. And they do. Some of the cast members that worked out there, they're so good. You know, they've worked out in the parking lot for so long. They know what time they parked in different rows. They don't need to look at the card anymore. And so when you come out at the end of the day and say you can't remember where you parked your car, you know, they'll act like they can just read your mind. You know, just kind of conjure that information out of the air. They'll say, well, what time did you come in? I'll say, well, it was about 9 o'clock. They'll say, hang on a second. I'm getting it. You would be parked in Goofy 23. And you're sitting there thinking like the Disney people can read our minds now, you know? And like the key control folks, as they're handing the keys back to people. And let's say it was the dad that did it, you know, it's embarrassing. So as they hand the keys back, they'll try to say something to, you know, save the dad's pride. And they'll say something like, I'm sorry, the keys got locked in the car. You know, like it was their fault. You know, and the dads will always say the same thing. That's okay. Yeah. Some are really tough ones say, just don't let it happen again, because then there'll be trouble. Yeah, to me, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to those moments of truth. When you are the organization that does something about those frustrations, you become a beacon of light in your industry. And when we can put the tools in our employees' hands to be heroes in those moments of truth like that, they will be motivated for it. And so I'm gonna have you flip one last time to that worksheet at the very last page there. And I want to just spend a few more minutes on a process that seems to cause ongoing frustration for your customers. And then what's one action that you and your company can take to really begin that solution process? We'll take 2 more minutes and then we'll come back out and close out here. All right, well, I thank y'all again for being here today. Those of you at home, thanks for joining us. And just to close out, when I really think about a truly service-driven organization, one with the employees really focusing in on creating a great experience for their customers instead of just completing the tasks. Now, I believe it's just these 4 things right here. Looking at everything through the lens of the customer, paying attention to the details because I know that everything speaks, creating those moments of wow, and eliminating the frustrations. And if you can do that, going back to what we talked about earlier today, the outcome is the loyalty. And when I think about really intense customer loyalty, most people think that because of my background, that my mind goes to Disney World. But it does not. When I think about really intense customer loyalty, my mind goes to this organization right here, Harley-Davidson. Because I want you all to imagine having a company where your customers, they are so loyal that they are willing to carve your company's name into their skin. All right, just imagine going up to any one of your customers and saying, roll up your sleeve. All right, and there it is. All right, that's the kind of loyalty that we should be striving for. All right, and while you're unlikely to get to the tattoo, I will guarantee you this. If you do look through the lens of your customers, if you do pay attention to the details, if you do create those moments of wow and eliminate the frustrations, well, you probably won't get to the tattoo, but you will get to the loyalty. And to me, that is worth every moment of effort that we put into it. I want to thank y'all again for having me here on Customer Service Week. I hope this was helpful, but thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Danny. That was very, very well done. We truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day and being a part of this National Customer Service Week celebration. Now everybody go back to work.
Thanks, Jeannie.